I chose the pretty blue and yellow one, and it wasn't until I was showing this to some people at work and one of the guys went, "Did you know there's a on the cover?" And I went, "Oh my goodness, yes there is," and I didn't even realise, and now I can't look at it without noticing it. So I'm Ruby from the Useful Journal. I do journal reviews and share journal spreads on my YouTube channel, and I have a website as well. And I really love washi tape, so lots of my spreads have washi tape, but my first love is doing, and the reason I started all this is because I love doing journal reviews. Today I am reviewing the Nuna journal. Brandbook, the company, has been around for more than 20 years, but the Nuna label has only been around for about 4 years. The journals are made and distributed in Europe. The company is based in Germany. They use paper from the Munken mill, which is in Sweden, and the paper pulp that is sourced for that mill comes from mostly Sweden and Poland. That is an Arctic paper brand, and the paper is sourced from sustainable forests, certified sustainable forests. What is worth noting about this is that the Munken mill in Sweden is the first mill in the world, the first paper mill in the world to become cradle to cradle certified. This is a really standout accreditation because to achieve it, they have to prove that their products are good for the environment. They have to use regenerative materials. They have to avoid air, water and soil pollution. They have to use renewable energy. They have to reduce emissions, and they have to consider human rights in the production of their paper products. Brandbook supports Bergwald Project, EV, which is a reforestation initiative, and they focus on things like planting trees and also on controlling erosion, reducing erosion of the soil. I bought my Nuna journal through Amazon, but it is available through a lot of stores where you can actually go and touch and feel the product to see whether you like it. I've given you a list here. When I received the journal, there was very little packaging. It just had a layer of shrink wrap. There was no belly band, so very little packaging. Because of the recycled leather cover, it's actually a very flexible journal. I actually really like the cover. I like these flex covers. Paper Blanks is another one that does covers like this. I like them because they reduce the bulk of the journal and just make it easier to carry around, fit into things. It's got texture to it, and I think that's because it is actually screen printed afterwards, so you can kind of feel the artwork. The covers also come in a jeans label material. There's a leatherette version, so there are a couple of other materials available. While we're on the covers, there is a huge range of different cover options, about 100, although that's across different sizes of journals, but there is a lot of different patterns. Not so many cutesy ones because they don't really do cutesy. They're more of an edgy design company, but there's a huge choice and there should be something for everyone. This journal, the L size, which is their largest size, is 165 by 220 millimeters. A standard A5 is about 148 by 210 millimeters, so it's a little bit longer and more than a little bit wider. That makes a significant difference and gives you a lot more space for your spreads, and it's something that I really like about it. The journals have no features. There is no pen loop, there's no pocket on the back, there's no elastic closure, there's no ribbon bookmarks, nothing. It's just the journal. You do, if you want to call that a feature, you do get page numbers and they are small. There's no index marking, there's no markings for the middle of the page, anything like that. There is just the dot grid, and there is page numbers, and that's it. Many of the Nuna notebooks have covers that are made from recycled leather, and this is one of them. The recycled leather is actually created by gathering leather scraps from other production processes, and they shred them down and they put that together with a polyurethane binder, and then it's compressed onto a surface like paper to bind it all together. This means that it isn't a vegan product, but the final leather content is only about 10 to 20% of the final product. So it doesn't feel particularly leathery, but it does give it the durability of leather. The journal does open flat because it's so thick. When you get at the beginning and when you get to the end of the journal, you probably have to put another book underneath to work on it comfortably, but it's not super uncomfortable to work on otherwise. And I will note, even with my insert, so I've stuck lots of things in, it still closes. So sometimes when you start sticking a lot of things in, you really need that elastic closure to hold the journal closed, but as you can see, that's sitting pretty well, sitting up a tiny bit there, but not much. I've had some hardcover journals split on the spine, and this one I've used quite a lot now for 7 months, and it hasn't even started to look like it's getting damaged, so pretty happy with that. Now, as you might have noticed, this journal has blue edges. Some of the journals are really cool. The pattern actually goes from the cover around the edges and all in one design, so it's a continuous design, and there are rounded corners as well. This journal's a bit of a brick. It has 256 pages. That's almost 100 more than a standard A5 journal, say from Archer and Olive or someone like that. But because this one has the thin, flexible cover, even with that extra 100 pages, it's about the same thickness as, say, an Archer and Olive, because that thick card cover that they've got really adds thickness to the journal. It is heavier. This one is 640 grams and an Archer and Olive is 520 grams. Well, the last one I got was for 520 grams. I do wish I'd known about their L light range, because they do have this range that's the same size page as this, but it's only 176 pages long, so that gives you a much thinner journal. It's lighter, not as bulky. That one weighs 435 grams, so you can see that that's quite a lot lighter than the Archer and Olive, and for similar pages. There is an even more limited range of, it's 176 pages still, but it's a smaller size. They are 135 across by 200 millimeters long. Again, that is not a standard size. Germany must have different size guides for their pages. There are a few Nuna journals that are novelty journals, so they've got clouds printed on the pages. They come in different colours. There's one journal that's got multiple different colours through, and there's also a couple of journals that have different geometric designs on each page, which is kind of cool, and I really want to try it out. I don't know how I'd use it, but it just looks really cool. The stitched binding holds 14 signatures, and the signatures, so a signature is the mini booklet you get in your journal against the binding, and they're almost impossible to separate because the joins are invisible. It's a very, very good quality binding. Most journals have glue between the signatures, and this one does too, but often you'll get the glue coming up slightly between the joins of the separate signatures, and it means that every time there's a join, they don't sit as flat as your other pages, and it's a bit annoying, and sometimes they tear or they're uneven. So don't have that problem in this book. You can't see any glue, and the pages are even all the way through regardless of where they are. Moving on to the dot grid, there are no other markings other than the dot grid and the page numbers. The dot grid, which it seems to be a bit of a thing in Germany, is only 3.5 millimeters square. Most journals are 5 millimeter. I've found the 3.5 millimeter quite hard to get used to, but I do have larger writing, I suppose, and so in this journal I've had to write smaller than I normally do. I've had to stop writing in cursive and printing instead because my cursive writing just looks too crammed up on a 3.5 millimeter line, and I find that if I took 2 lines that would be too much. Apparently 7 millimeters is quite standard for a ruled page. And the other thing I've had to do is I've had to limit myself to just using my Sailor fine medium nib pen, fountain pen. Most of my fountain pens I've got medium nibs on because that's what I prefer, but the paper is uncoated, and so the medium nib pen just puts too much ink into the page and it just looks too, the lines are too thick and I couldn't read my writing very well. Because of the larger page and the smaller dot grid box sizes, there are 41 dots across the page and 57 along the length of the page. A normal journal has 27 by 39 dots. There is a 10 to 15 millimeter gap between the dots and the edges of the page, and that's the inside edge, the top and bottom, and the outside edge. It looks really neat and it's always even, but if you want to have something that has lines across the page, you're going to have that gap in the middle. So it's a little bit frustrating if you like to do that in your layouts because you do have too big a gap in the middle. The dots are perfectly aligned across those 2 pages, so if you want to draw a line across, it doesn't look out of place. The dots are a light grey colour. They're a tiny bit lighter than normal. In my pen test, you'll see that it gets a score of 2 out of 5, and most journals I find are a 3. The paper is only 120 GSM, so you've got a 120 GSM uncoated paper, you're going to get more ghosting than you would in a coated paper or in a compressed paper. So my Tuck Tea journal it's not coated, but it's so heavily compressed that there's less gaps for the ink to get through, so it acts like a coated paper. I think the journal I have with the most similar paper is probably my Jumping Fox journal, also a 120 GSM. The paper is cream though in that journal. I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but I prefer the paper in the Jumping Fox journal. I think it's slightly better quality. The paper is an off-white colour. It's not white and it's not cream, so it's nicely in the middle, and it's actually a really lovely colour to use. So this brings us to the pen test. The paper is slightly rough to the touch. I love that because especially if I'm using coloured pencils, uncoated paper means that if you're using wetter inks, if you're using watercolours, if you're using your Tombow markers, which are a water-based marker, even quite wet inks in your fountain pen will either bleed through or they'll just have fatter lines than normal, or they'll have that kind of rough looking edge that's called feathering. So you really need to think about your particular style and what kinds of media you like to use, because it'll look different in this journal because of the uncoated surface. There was a little bit of ghosting from some pens and markers. The Stabilo .88 is quite a dark, I've got a dark blue and it's quite a dark ink, and that ghosted through. When I was working in the journal, you could see some ghosting, for instance, from my Tombow markers. It probably depends how often, they're brush pens, it probably depends how often you go over the same stroke. pencil erases from the paper fairly cleanly. You might get a tiny little bit of ghosting left. And because of the off-white colour, the jelly roll was the best result for whiteout and my whiteout tape. So I do a test where I highlight before putting ink down and then after. Because of the uncoated paper, it soaks in really well and dries quickly. Now, I think I might have written on top of the highlighter fairly quickly after putting down the highlighter, so it was still a bit damp, and that's why it's kind of feathered quite badly. The main thing I want to talk to you about is the watercolour. Just don't use it. You could use watercolour if you're doing really light detail and you're not putting a lot of water on the page, like just light watercolour you could use. If you do use a lot of water, you won't get a lot of page crinkle, but you will get pilling and the page will get rougher and it just won't look good. Okay, so this has been a long review. We're nearly finished. I love the flex cover because it reduces the bulk of the journal. I like the colour of the paper and the dots, and I like the results with coloured pencils. Most of all, I really admire the company's approach to sustainability. Paper companies are some of the worst polluters in the world. Just the process causes a lot of pollution. And so I'm always excited to see a company that is trying to reduce their impact. They also provide a depth of information about their company on their website, on the Nuna website and the Brandbook website and on the Arctic Paper website about their product that is just fantastic. I get very nervous when I see a company who doesn't tell you very much because they've got something to hide. If they're proud of what they're doing, then they will share lots of information about their product, about their company on their website. As I'm sure you've guessed, I didn't love the 3.5mm grid. I don't know if I would buy another journal that had 3.5mm grid, but I also love using lots of different types of media. I love my watercolour writing inks and I love using my Tombow markers, so I felt a bit restricted in this journal just because of that. So I would tend to not probably go usually lower than 140 GSM. So that's just me. Everyone's different. It's a huge bonus that there's so many covers to choose from. I'm going to look a bit more carefully next time so that I don't make the same mistake with the cover I chose, but I do love the cover in general, and maybe I'll just have to cover up that little bit, put a fig leaf over it or something, but there's lots of other covers I love from Nuna, so yeah, lots of choice. I think I'll have to leave the decision up to you because it really does depend on how you like to use your journal. I hope you found this review interesting. Please like and subscribe, and I promise I will have another review to you soon. I'll see you soon. Bye.